In part 1, we uncovered the disappearance of a Louisiana school bus carrying 14 black children, their teacher, and a driver. For 10 years, officials denied the trip ever happened. The case was closed as a runaway. But then, the bus was found, half submerged in a swamp, empty except for a child's handprint pressed to the rear window. What we discovered next would take us far beyond that swamp, into a deeper cover-up, a trafficking network, and the truth they try to bury. Before we continue, here's a quick reminder of the key people involved. Denise Warren is the mother of Jada, one of the missing children. She never gave up searching. Simone Bellamy is the journalist who first covered the story in 2014 and lost her job for asking too many questions. She's been investigating it ever since. Detective Lance Morrow is the officer who reopened the case after the bus was found. And Ms. Bernice Daniels was the beloved teacher who organized the field trip and disappeared along with the children and the driver, Mr. Clay Hopkins. Now let's continue. Simone Bellamy, the journalist, opened the envelope slowly, careful not to smudge the edges. It had been left at her office door sometime before sunrise. No stamp, no handwriting on the outside. Inside was a folded note, a printed satellite map, and a single sentence. Start here. They moved them south. At the bottom, a name was scratched faintly in pencil, Nuevo Futura. She showed it to Detective Morrow that same morning. He studied the map, which outlined a rural shipping warehouse outside Lafayette, Louisiana. No company name, no signage. Just coordinates and a structure that had once belonged to Conway and Braxtor's logistics division. It had been abandoned since 2016, listed as inactive storage. But something about the timing felt deliberate. By noon, they had a warrant and a forensics team. The building was in worse condition than expected. Vines crept through broken windows. Mold laced the ceiling, and several file cabinets had already been smashed or set on fire years earlier. Most of the paperwork had been shredded or waterlogged. But one cabinet, bolted to the wall in the back, had been overlooked. Inside were scattered folders marked Q2 and Q3 2014 logistics. Some were blank, some were coded. One thick folder, damp at the corners, was labeled Youth Outbound, Internal Transfer. They opened it and began reading. There were rosters, names, fake ID numbers, dates of birth, transit routes. Morrow scanned the names and stopped cold. Terrell Smith, Ariel James, Kamini Carter, Malik Harris, Zoe Carter, Destiny Ford, Trinity Knox, Zaire Owens, Elijah Johnson, Lamar Briscoe, Monique Bell, Rashad Green. 12 names in total. All of them were children from the missing Booker T. elementary class. But 2 names were missing, Jada Warren and Zoe Carter. Simone double-checked the list, flipped the pages, checked the folders on the shelf. Nothing. No alternate record. No secondary manifest. They were simply gone. These were the ones moved officially, Morrow said. What about the others? They either escaped, died, or were never processed, Simone replied, her voice low. Or someone tried to erase them. Behind the cabinet, tucked into the corner, one small drawer had been duct-taped shut. Morrow peeled it back and pulled out a melted USB drive, a few strips of photo negatives, and a sealed envelope. On the front, written in tiny block letters, were 5 words, saved. Not safe. I tried. Simone unfolded the note inside. It was written in a mix of Spanish and broken English. The handwriting was shaky, the ink smudged in places. But the message was clear. I saw the woman try to stop them. They hurt her. I wanted to help. I could not. I tried again later. I kept some names. I could not keep all. They took them far. Nuevo Futura was just the start. The girl with the lizard key cried for her mom. I remember her. Simone's hands tightened around the note. That's Jada, she whispered. The keychain. Morrow looked up. He saw her. That means she was alive after the swamp. They took the USB and the papers back to the precinct and turned them over to digital forensics. Most of the files were corrupted, but one folder opened. It was labeled 2014_BTX, DX_child transfer _permission. Inside were scans of false guardianship documents. Each showed a signature from someone named L. Herrera, authorizing the transfer of minors from Louisiana to Durango, Mexico, under a youth outreach program titled Nuevo Futura. The organization had no website, no tax records, no history. Morrow called an old contact at DHS. Within minutes, he confirmed. The name Nuevo Futura had come up once, briefly, in a 2016 customs inspection involving a private bus carrying 9 undocumented minors through El Paso. The driver claimed it was a summer education tour. The children were nonverbal and had no ID. No charges were filed. That was the only record. Simone stared at the screen. They took our kids across the border, and no one blinked. Later that night, Denise Warren came to the station. Morrow and Simone laid out the roster in front of her. Her eyes scanned the list of names, 12 in total. Jada's wasn't there. She's not on it, she said quietly. That's not necessarily bad, Simone replied. It means she wasn't processed like the others. She might have escaped, or someone erased her name. Denise stared at the old drawing they'd recovered from the bus. Our real trip, Jada had written in orange crayon. The map had been crude, but it showed a long, winding road south, away from the swamp, away from home. I always knew she didn't just disappear, Denise said. I could feel it. Morrow stepped outside for air and called his contact at Interpol. He wanted to know everything he could about Nuevo Futura. He wanted to know who El Herrero was. He wanted border logs, satellite data, foreign facility permits. If even one child had been smuggled out of Louisiana in 2014, someone would have seen something. Back in the evidence room, Simone reviewed the photo negatives. Some were too damaged to develop, but one, held against a lamp, showed the blurry outline of children in a concrete courtyard. The resolution was poor, but she could make out uniforms, dirt paths, a red wall, and a mural that looked like a tree. In the corner was a timestamp burned faintly into the frame. 2016. 2 years after the field trip. They're alive, she whispered. They were moved, not murdered. In the weeks that followed, Simone received another tip. This one was more direct. It read, I know where the rest are. I will only meet in person. Come alone. South Texas. It was signed with a name, Angel M., and it matched the initials from the envelope in the warehouse. Simone sat alone in the booth of a rundown diner off the I-69 frontage road in southern Texas. The blinds were half closed, the air smelled like burnt coffee, and the waitress had stopped asking if she wanted anything else. Across from her, the seat remained empty. She had been waiting for 43 minutes. Her phone sat face down on the table, silent. Angel had said he'd come. The message was clear. No police. Come alone. I'll know. At minute 47, a man walked through the door. Mid-40s, brown skin, lean build. Faded baseball cap, scuffed boots, a hoodie zipped to the neck. He didn't look at her at first. He walked to the counter, asked for to-go coffee, then turned slightly, his eyes scanning the room. When they landed on her, they didn't blink. He walked over and sat across from her without a word. You're Angel, Simone said, not asking. He nodded once. I saw the story. The bus. The swamp. You sent the warehouse map. I sent all of it, he said. I've been trying since 2015. No one listened. Or they were scared. Or they died. She leaned forward. Who are you? He took a deep breath. I used to work for a subcontractor. Logistics. Conway and Braxter used us for land prep and facility support. They had a deal with a nonprofit called Nuevo Futura. It was supposed to be a youth outreach program, but it wasn't. It was a funnel. He sipped his coffee. His hands trembled. In 2014, they brought in a private shipment from Louisiana. It came in through Eagle Pass, bypassed federal inspection. 14 kids, all black. 1 teacher, 1 driver. The truck had falsified papers. Said it was a church retreat group. No one questioned it. They had uniforms, school bags, even fake forms. We were told not to talk to them. Simone's voice tightened. You saw them. He nodded. They were scared. Quiet. The teacher, she was different. She kept asking to see someone. Kept saying it was a mistake. She fought one of the men when they separated the kids. They dragged her into the woods. She didn't come back. Simone's breath caught. Ms. Daniels. Angel nodded again. I saw her name on a badge later. Bernice. She didn't go quiet. And the driver? They said he got cold feet. Tried to run. They said he didn't make it far. Simone looked down, silent. Then, why didn't you stop it? Angel's eyes filled with something between guilt and rage. I tried. I was just a runner. I brought supplies, kept records. I asked too many questions. They cut me off, sent me north, told me if I ever came back, I'd disappear too. So I stayed quiet. But I didn't forget. I kept copies, notes, maps. He pulled a folded paper from his jacket and slid it across the table. Simone opened it. It was hand-drawn but detailed, a layout of a facility in rural Durango, Mexico. Barrack-style rooms, a dining hall, a courtyard. In one corner, the word Tree Mural was written in block letters. That place was shut down 2 years ago. But the last time I heard anything, the surviving kids had been moved again. Smaller group, maybe 7, maybe 8. The new site is deeper inland, outside a town called Santa Lucia. Simone pulled out her phone and opened a private encrypted app she used for field notes. Why now, she asked. Why reach out again? Because they're not going to survive another move, he said. The operation's unraveling. You exposed them. They're cleaning house. And those kids? They're witnesses. He stood. I don't know who to trust. But I've seen you fight. Simone looked up at him. Will you testify? He shook his head. I'll give you everything I have. But if I go public, I won't make it a week. I've already lasted longer than I should have. Before she could reply, he was already walking out. She stared at the map in her hands. Tree Mural. Barracks. Final location. The name Santa Lucia circled 3 times. That night, she returned to Baton Rouge and met with Morrow in the parking lot behind the station. They leaned over the hood of his car as she spread out the map and relayed Angel's full story. Morrow didn't speak until she finished. If this is real, we're not just talking about Louisiana anymore, he said. We're talking about federal, cross-border trafficking, government blind spots, church, school, development companies, law enforcement, all complicit. And we're running out of time, she added. He nodded slowly. We'll need Interpol, Mexican authorities, and someone at DHS who won't stonewall us. But first, we need confirmation. Physical proof. Simone reached into her bag and handed him a Ziploc bag containing the photo negative Angel had included in his note. It was faint, but clear enough under light. A row of children, seated on a bench in front of a painted tree. Their faces blurred, but the setting matched the chalk drawing from a chamber. Same pattern, same angle. They're alive, Simone said. Morrow exhaled hard. Then we go to Santa Lucia. 3 days later, they were on a flight to Mexico. What they found in Santa Lucia would be worse than either of them imagined. But for the first time, they were closing in. Not on remains, on survivors. The air in Santa Lucia was hot and slow, the kind that stuck to your skin and made every breath feel like a burden. The town sat in the shadow of 2 ridgelines, its streets quiet, its concrete buildings worn smooth by time. Nothing about it suggested it once held stolen children. That was the point. Simone and Morrow arrived under the cover of coordination, officially backed by the U.S. consulate, with limited assistance from Mexican authorities who had no desire to be dragged into an international trafficking scandal. They were told not to raise alarms, not to mention missing children, not to speak to locals unless absolutely necessary. So they started with the map. Angel's hand-drawn diagram led them a mile outside town to what used to be a youth rehabilitation center called Refugio Nuevo Futura. It had closed 2 years ago. The front gate was padlocked. The yard was overgrown with weeds, a broken swing creaking in the dry wind. They cut through the chain and stepped inside. The building had no power. Inside, the hallways were stripped bare, beds removed, doors unhinged, walls tagged with graffiti. Yet traces remained. Carvings in the concrete floor, initials, tally marks. A scrap of paper pinned under a floorboard, torn from a notebook, with 3 names written in pencil. Kaimani, Trinity, Jada. Simone dropped to her knees, staring at the names like a prayer had been answered. They moved room to room, searching for anything untouched. In one back dormitory, Morrow opened a cracked wardrobe and found a small cloth bag tucked in the corner. Inside were several braided friendship bracelets, stiff with time, one of them woven with the colors of the Pan-African flag. Another had a plastic charm, a tiny red dinosaur. Simone reached for it, then froze. Jada, she whispered. On the far wall of the same room, beneath years of dust and mold, was a chalk mural. It showed a tree, twisted, thick and large. The branches curled out like open arms. Beneath it, faint outlines of children holding hands circled the base. Someone had tried to erase part of it, but the dust had preserved enough. At the center was a tiny message scratched beneath the trunk. We still remember. We still wait. Simone backed up and took a photo. They lived here, Morrow said. They survived here. Later that day, they met with a quiet priest who had served the town for 30 years. He said the facility had been used under the name Nuevo Futura, supposedly to reform troubled foreign children. No one questioned it much. They were told the kids were orphaned, violent, or undergoing behavior modification. The facility was always guarded. The children rarely seen. Sometimes he'd hear crying late at night when the wind was right. Simone showed him the bracelets. The priest went pale. I heard someone say once, he murmured, they called it the tree school, because the first girl they lost was buried under the old fig tree out back. Simone and Morrow followed him to the rear of the facility where a dried-out fig tree still stood. Its roots were thick and exposed. Beneath them, the soil had been disturbed years ago and never properly refilled. A crude cross lay half-buried in dirt. Morrow didn't dig. He just stood there. We're not going to find them all, are we? Simone asked. No, he said, but maybe we'll find enough to finish it. 2 days later, a young man named Raul approached their vehicle outside a corner store. He looked barely 20, clothes worn, face sunburned and tight with caution. You're the Americans, he said, looking for the ones they kept in the barn. Morrow didn't flinch. What barn? Raul nodded for them to follow. He led them up a dirt road flanked by cornfields and low fences until they reached a ranch on the edge of the hills. It looked abandoned, but the path was cleared. Fresh tire tracks. He pointed to a faded red building behind a line of trees. They kept them there until about 2 months ago. Then trucks came. Took most of them, but not all. How many stayed? Simone asked. Raul hesitated. 7, maybe 8. They didn't let them out much. But one girl used to sing. At night. Something about home. They didn't have a warrant. They didn't wait for one. Morrow unholstered his weapon and moved quietly toward the barn. Simone followed behind, heart pounding. Inside, the air was thick with rot and mildew. Old hay covered the floor. A few broken cots were still against the walls. But in the back, behind a stack of crates, was a trapdoor. Morrow opened it and lowered his flashlight. A concrete room. Shallow. Cold. And inside, 7 young adults sat huddled in silence, their backs against the walls. When the light hit them, they didn't move at first. One girl blinked and shielded her eyes. Simone stepped forward, her voice cracking. Are you? A boy in the back stood slowly. His voice was dry, but clear. We're the ones they forgot. Then another voice, softer, familiar, raw. Are you from Louisiana? Simone nodded. The girl stepped forward, trembling. Her hair was longer now, her body thinner, but her eyes hadn't changed. I'm Jada, she said. Then she whispered, Is my mama still waiting? Simone's voice broke. She never stopped. Jada fell forward into her arms, and the rest began to cry. 7 names long buried, now spoken aloud. Survivors. Still alive. Still waiting. And finally found. The barn compound was silent except for the sobbing. 7 young adults, all between 19 and 21, stood in stunned stillness as sunlight streamed through the open trapdoor. Jada Warren hadn't let go of Simone's coat. Her voice trembled when she said, We thought no one was coming. We thought we died down there. Just slowly, Simone helped her up the wooden ladder. Morrow radioed the consulate and gave their coordinates. It took 20 minutes for local law enforcement and emergency medics to arrive, but the children, no, not children anymore, refused to move until they were sure the others were real. One by one, they were lifted from the cellar. 2 couldn't walk without assistance. 1 was nearly mute from trauma, but they were alive. Jada, Zoe, Kaimani, Trinity, Destiny, Rashad, Monique, 7 of the original 14. Jada sat wrapped in a blanket outside the barn, blinking in the sunlight like she hadn't seen it in months. She clutched a crumpled drawing in her hands, old, folded dozens of times. It showed a yellow bus with the words Lakeview or Bust scribbled on it, but someone had crossed that out and written "We Still Wait" over the windows. A paramedic knelt beside her, gently wiping dirt from her cheek. Simone moved from child to child, gently confirming names, checking for familiarity. When she reached Zoe, the young woman looked at her for a long moment before whispering, "I remember your voice. From the videos." Simone blinked, surprised. "You saw my reports?" Zoe nodded slowly. "We had a phone once. They showed us. One of the older girls. She's not here anymore." Simone sat with her. "What happened to the others?" Zoe's jaw clenched. "Two got sick the first year. We think it was something in the water. They didn't make it. They took them out in bags. We never saw where they went. Another, he tried to run. A boy named Lamar. They said he got away. But we don't believe that. They never said anything again. Just took his bed and gave it to someone else." Morrow stood nearby, overhearing. He wrote the names in his notebook with quiet, steady hands. Lamar Briscoe, Elijah Johnson, Terrell Smith. Zoe continued. "We were moved 4 times. They said we were special. They said our parents didn't want us. But we knew. We remembered. We said our names out loud every night. To keep them real." Jada leaned over, voice hoarse. "We even said Ms. Daniels' name. Every time." Morrow knelt beside her. "Jada, do you remember what happened the day the bus never came back?" She looked at him, eyes sharp despite the fatigue. "They made us take a new road. Said it was construction. Ms. Daniels didn't want to. She argued with a man. He had a clipboard and a gun. I remember his eyes. Cold. He said if she didn't drive, they'd hurt someone. She refused," Jada whispered. "So Mr. Hopkins drove. But when we got to the turn, she stood up in the aisle. She told us to be brave. Then she yelled at the man in the road. He pulled her off the bus. That's the last time I saw her." Morrow nodded slowly. "You did good remembering that." The compound was cleared within the hour. Mexican authorities secured the site. The children were transported in 2 ambulances to a hospital in Monterrey for stabilization. Simone and Morrow followed in a separate vehicle, not saying much. The silence wasn't from grief, it was awe. Back in Baton Rouge, Denise Warren stood in her kitchen when the call came. Her sister handed her the phone with trembling fingers. "It's her," she mouthed. Denise pressed it to her ear and heard the breath she'd waited a decade for. "Mama." It was Jada's voice. Tired, older, but still hers. Denise dropped to her knees, clutching the counter with one hand and the phone with the other. "Baby, is it really you?" "I waited," Jada said. "I didn't forget." Neither of them said another word for a long time. Just the quiet sound of 2 broken halves becoming whole again. When Simone returned to the U.S. 3 days later, she held a press conference. She didn't give names. She didn't mention the exact location. But she made one thing clear. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't a mistake. These children were stolen, processed, shipped, and forgotten by every system meant to protect them. Until now, questions exploded across the media. Where the rest? Who funded it? Why did it take 10 years? But Simone stayed focused on the names. In a quiet room that night, she sat with Denise and Jada, who had finally returned home. Jada didn't want to sleep in her old bed. Not yet. She lay on the couch, head in her mother's lap, staring at the ceiling. "You're safe now," Denise whispered. "I don't feel safe," Jada said. "Not yet." "That's okay," her mother replied. "You're home. That's enough for today." On the coffee table sat a worn-out dinosaur keychain, faded and scratched. Jada reached for it, ran her fingers over it slowly. "I kept it as long as I could," she said. "They found it, took it, but I still had the picture." Simone snapped a photo of the moment without flash. No spotlight, no headline, just a mother and daughter. A keychain, and the first quiet moment of peace either had known in 10 years. The system had buried them, but they had come back. The return home was quiet. Simone and Morrow flew with the 7 rescued survivors on a private charter, organized discreetly to avoid the press. Each of them was given a new set of clothes, basic health checkups, and assigned a trauma specialist. But the silence in the cabin said everything. Nobody wanted to talk about what they'd left behind. Not yet. The survivors didn't sit together. They sat apart, as if unsure whether they were allowed to connect now that they were back in the country that let them vanish. Jada sat closest to the front, staring out the window, fingers curled tightly around the strap of her seatbelt. Zoe sat near the back, arms crossed, hoodie pulled up. Rashad was asleep, head against the window, lips moving silently in his sleep. Back in Baton Rouge, Denise Warren waited at the hospital where her daughter and the others would undergo full evaluation. She stood outside with her hands shaking, a small notebook tucked into her purse. Inside were the names of the original 14, plus Ms. Daniels and Clay Hopkins. She wasn't waiting to hear who made it. She already knew. She just wanted to hear their stories. All of them. 2 days later, the survivors began to speak. Simone recorded the interviews herself, not for television, but for documentation. Each young adult was given the chance to speak in a private room, without cameras or pressure. Some couldn't talk for long. Others broke down midway through. But slowly, a full timeline began to form. Jada spoke first. Her voice was calm, methodical, like someone reading a police report. She remembered the exact moment the bus turned off the main road. They said there was flooding, she explained. Ms. Daniels didn't believe them. She argued. The man with the clipboard had a gun. Mr. Hopkins kept looking in the rearview mirror. You could tell he was scared. She paused. When we reached the clearing, they blocked the road. 3 trucks. Ms. Daniels stood up, told us to stay seated, told us to be brave. What happened next? Simone asked softly. Jada's voice cracked for the first time. She got off the bus. One of the men grabbed her by the collar. She pushed him. He hit her with the back of the gun. Then they dragged her behind one of the trucks. We never saw her again. She looked down. Mr. Hopkins started yelling. Said this wasn't what he signed up for. They told him to shut up and drive. He didn't. He stayed with us until they forced him into one of the trucks. He fought. He kicked. But they had too many. Zoe confirmed the story in her own words. She added that once they crossed into Mexico, the group was split into 2. She remembered seeing a boy, Elijah Johnson, being taken to a separate truck after coughing for 2 days straight. She never saw him again. I think he died, she said flatly. They didn't want sick ones. The story grew darker with each voice. Rashad said he remembered being locked in a small room for days after trying to escape. Trinity remembered sleeping next to a girl named Destiny, who stopped speaking completely by their 2nd year in captivity. They moved us every time we got too comfortable, Trinity whispered. New place, new names. They burned our clothes, gave us uniforms, said we were being given a second chance. And if you didn't follow the rules? Simone asked. They had rules, Kamini said, but they didn't follow them. In total, 3 of the original 14 had died, 2 from untreated illness, 1 after attempting to escape during a facility transfer. Ms. Daniels was confirmed to have been killed at the swamp site. Mr. Hopkins was never seen again, but Jada recalled seeing his watch, silver band, cracked face, being worn by one of the guards in Durango. She had memorized the time frozen on it, 11:08 a.m. Simone brought the testimonies to Morrow, who had already begun building a case file linking Conway and Braxtor's land holdings to the Nuevo Futura program. The connections were damning. Dozens of scanned emails, fake zoning permits, subcontractor rosters, and shell company payments all painted the same picture. This was not a one-time event. This was a pipeline, a business. Documents showed Conway and Braxtor had received over $4.3 million in development donations between 2012 and 2015, money that was funneled into property acquisition in swamp-adjacent and rural areas. One spreadsheet labeled Impact Report included child headcounts, transportation dates, and coded outcomes. One code, repeated 14 times, was marked CCNFTX, later confirmed to stand for Conway and Company, Nuevo Futura Transfer, terminated or exported. Among the recovered documents was a draft of an internal email. It was never sent, but had been saved in a hidden folder on a wiped laptop, recovered by digital forensics. It read, Delay school board objections. Reassign Officer P to internal handling. Ensure Charlene signs off quietly. Ms. D is a problem. Limit her reach. The bus must be redirected without trail. Final drop. Santa Lucia, or alternate, pending border clearance. Morrow circled 3 names: Officer Pickens, Superintendent Charlene Moss, Victor Braxter, all still uncharged. That evening, Simone received a voicemail from Angel, the original tipper. His voice was rushed. "They know I talked," he said. "I saw a car outside the house. I'm leaving tonight. I left one last box at the address I gave you before. It has the original logs. If I don't make it, tell them I tried again." The next day, the box was found behind a shuttered grocery store in McAllen, Texas. Inside were flash drives, original facility memos, and one small Polaroid photo: children sitting in a bunkhouse, staring straight into the camera. In the background stood a man in a church collar. Pastor Elijah Franklin. He had always said he was misled, but he had been there, and now they could prove it. The vigil was held at dusk in Martin Luther King Jr. Park, the same spot where grieving parents once gathered a decade ago, waving missing posters into news cameras that quickly moved on. This time, there were no chants, no loudspeakers, just candles, dozens of them, lining the sidewalk in trembling rows. Some flickered in old mason jars. Others sat inside children's plastic cups, decorated with faded cartoon characters. Simone stood near the front, holding a folder packed with everything she had fought to bring to light: testimonies, maps, photos, the confiscated emails. She had published it all under a documentary titled "The Names They Tried to Bury." It had gone live 3 days earlier. In 72 hours, it had been viewed over 10 million times. Denise Warren stepped up to the microphone in silence. The crowd, 100 strong now, fell still. "My daughter came home," she said, but not all of them did. She opened her notebook and began to read. Ariel James, Carmen E. Carter, Jada Warren, Terrell Smith, Nia Franklin, Zaire Owens, Malik Harris, Destiny Ford, Lamar Briscoe, Trinity Knox, Elijah Johnson, Monique Bell, Rashad Green, Zoe Carter. She paused. Ms. Bernice Daniels, Mr. Clay Hopkins. Each name was followed by the quiet chime of a handbell. 14 children, 2 adults, a full classroom, silence for 10 years. When she was done, she closed the book and stepped back, her eyes filled but unblinking. Behind her, the rescued children stood in a solemn line, older now, but visibly shaken. Jada held Zoe's hand. Trinity wiped her cheek with her sleeve. Rashad stared at the ground. They were simple clothes. No spotlight, no stage, just presence. After the vigil, Simone returned to her studio. She uploaded a final segment, unpolished, unedited, titled "The One Who Tried to Help." In it, she told Angel's full story: his work with the subcontractors, his failed attempt to help Ms. Daniels, his risk in sending the tips, and his disappearance. He hadn't been heard from in 6 days. His final message had included a scanned ledger. One line stood out: news site prep, East Parish proposal, pending zoning. They were going to do it again. Somewhere else. Simone turned to the camera. "You can't bury the names anymore," she said, "because we're saying them now. Loud." The clip ended with Ms. Daniels' last journal entry, recovered fully after forensic treatment. It read, "They're taking us. The kids are scared, but I told them we'd be okay. I don't believe it anymore. I hear trucks. I hear men. They're not coming to help. If anyone finds this, tell my son I didn't run. I stayed. I tried." Simone's voice cracked as she read the last word. Tried. 2 weeks later, a new congressional inquiry was launched. Charlene Moss resigned for personal reasons. Victor Braxter's accounts were frozen. Pastor Franklin fled the state. Officer Pickens remained missing, his face plastered across television screens for the first time ever, but not for commendation. For what he had concealed. Inside Booker T. Elementary, which had remained abandoned since its shutdown, local volunteers began repainting the walls. One room, Ms. Daniels' old classroom, was preserved exactly as it was. The chalkboard still read "Field Trip, Lakeview, Friday." Someone left a Polaroid on her desk, the final group photo recovered from Angel's crate. The one where the children were lined up in front of the swamp bus. In the back, just barely visible, stood 2 men in orange vests. One held a clipboard. The other wore dark sunglasses. His smile was unmistakable. Maurice Pickens. Jada later told Simone that the man with the clipboard was the one who yanked Ms. Daniels off the bus. He said she was just a teacher, like that made her disposable. Jada shook when she said it. But she wasn't. She was ours. Weeks passed. Then, in the middle of the night, Simone received an unmarked envelope. Inside was a single photo. Ms. Daniels sitting on a metal chair, her wrists bound in front of her. Behind her, a white wall, and the same tree mural scene in the chalk drawings. Her expression wasn't fear. It was defiance. On the back of the photo, written in neat ballpoint pen, she told us to wait. She told the truth. Simone cried for the first time since the story began. Later that month, a foundation was created, the Daniels Hopkins Project. Funded by donations, its mission was to investigate missing children cases, specifically those erased by systems too lazy or corrupt to care. Denise Warren became a board member. Jada gave the opening speech. We didn't run away. We were taken, she said, but we still knew our names. And now the world knows them too. The ceremony ended with 14 lanterns released into the sky. No speeches, no hashtags, just the soft rise of lights over a city that once turned away. And somewhere, in a locked room full of cold files and stamped lies, a photo still hung. The yellow bus, cracked windows, and a handprint on glass. They waited, and someone finally came.